All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Got a fun show for you today. We're hitting 3 games from the in-season tournament slate last night. The Golden State Warriors versus the Denver Nuggets, the Orlando Magic versus the New York Knicks, and the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Dallas Mavericks. We're going to be breaking down all 3 of those games from the perspective of all 6 teams before we get out of here for the day. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @_JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for the Hoops Tonight channel. We're releasing more content as well as show announcements and show links and stuff like that. Make sure you guys follow those pages. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We're going to be recording a new mailbag on Friday this week. Lastly, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys for a second about game time. Now is a great time of the year to go see an event. We've got NFL in full swing, NBA in full swing, NHL in full swing, college football, college basketball, concerts and comedy shows. I just saw an announcement this morning that Dead & Company is coming back to the Sphere in Las Vegas next year in March, April, and May. I'm super, super excited about that. You got to get out to these events, these concerts, these games. It's just better than the experience that we get when we're at home. And the best ticket buying experience that I've personally encountered is Game Time. They have a super user-friendly process. You can check out in as soon as 2 taps. You have all-in pricing, so you know what you're getting, or you know what you're about to pay before you go to check out. You have a picture of your seat in the app, so you know what you're getting with your money. They also have a new feature called Game Time Picks to make that process more efficient, so you're not sifting through thousands of tickets. You can click on an event and just see the best deals that are available, curated and presented to you in a way that is easier for you to interpret and find what works best for you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code HOOPS. That's HOOPS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Golden State, Denver. Golden State goes on a huge run in the late third quarter, early fourth quarter that puts them up by 11. All of the role players were making plays. Moses Moody was awesome in this stretch. Hit a bunch of key jump shots. Gary Payton was scoring on cuts. He had a couple of buckets on cuts. He had a huge corner 3 right in front of his bench there in the left corner. They forced turnovers. They got out in transition. Kyle Anderson had this crazy, nifty driving up and under finish on the right side of the basket. Buddy Hield hit a big corner 3 out of the left corner. Brandon Pajemski hit a big pull-up jump shot against Jokic in a deep drop coverage. Everybody was making plays. It was beautiful basketball. And by the way, for all the guys that have have wondered why I've been talking about needing a trade, of bringing in a reliable secondary offensive player, this is really why. The Warriors are pretty fucking good when they score the basketball. When guys that are not Steph Curry can score the basketball. There were a lot of self-created plays in that sequence. Moses Moody hit a 3 coming off of a dribble handoff out of the right corner where he just rose up on the move when his man kind of went underneath the screen and he rose up and knocked it down. That's more or less self-created. Kyle Anderson snaking through the lane and going up and under and finishing a layup, that's more or less self-created. Brandon Pajemski hitting a jump shot against a drop coverage, that's self-created. Gary Payton hit a shot coming out of a dribble handoff in the right corner in the fourth quarter. We hit a left-handed floater in the lane. That's a self-created shot. When guys on the Warriors are capable of creating and making shots for themselves, it makes them look a lot better because they have such a great defense. It allows them to cover for a night where Steph Curry doesn't necessarily have the most efficient scoring night, right? But then they're very inconsistent, and when those players suddenly go cold, it becomes a problem. The final sequence of this game, when the Warriors were down 2, Steph gets denied. Denver successfully denies him the basketball twice. And so it ends up being a Kuminga drive that goes nowhere and an Andrew Wiggins drive that goes nowhere. It would be a luxury to have consistent self-created baskets that come off of Steph Curry. That's why that concept has been something that myself and many others have been harping on all season, because it's not always going to be the way it was at the start of the year. There are ups and downs. There are stretches where guys go cold. Sometimes you do play bad basketball for a couple of weeks and you drop 5 games in a row. And you can make those stretches shorter and you can extend your good stretches by bringing in more consistent offensive production. It's why we've been harping on that, right? But Denver was down by 11 with 6 minutes left. Again, in large part because of that consistent shot creation from other Warriors. And then Denver just started to methodically work their way back into the game. through the strength of their superstar, Nikola Jokic. It started with him right in the middle of the floor against Trayce Jackson-Davis. Just hits a couple of easy face-up jumpers right in his face. There was a really nice pass that Russell Westbrook threw to Michael Porter Jr. in that stretch too, where they ran a little off-ball action. They ran it twice. The first time they ran it with Russ threw a rifle pass. Moses Moody had his back turn, hit Michael Porter right in the hands, goes up and dunks it. They tried running it on the very next possession, and Kyle Anderson kind of snuffed it out and got a block. But they got a big bucket there on the MPJ curl off of the Russ pass. There was a Jokic give and go off of a pump fake where he just kind of dribbled into like a shot, like pump faked it. The Trayce Jackson-Davis like jumps off of his feet, gives up the ball, and then just cuts behind it, gets the ball right back and lays it up. And remember, that's the threat of the jump shot, which is so important for Jokic. Earlier in the same half, he had another pick and pop with Jamal Murray on the left wing, pops above the break, pump fake. Trayce Jackson-Davis leaves his feet, just lumbers down the lane and gets a layup. That's such an important part of his offense. And again, like last year, when his jumper wasn't on, he got 1.06 points per spot up, 1.28 points per roll or pop. This year, 1.36 points per spot up and 1.36 points per roll and pop. So like significantly more off-ball scoring and gravity from Jokic just by him getting that jump shot back on track. And again, it's not always going to manifest with him making jump shots. It's going to manifest with him getting easier opportunities around the basket to either score or play make for his teammates off of the attention that his jumper can bring. So gets that give and go. That cuts the lead to 5 with 4 minutes left. Then they go to this just right block post up, and they ended up getting 2 buckets for Aaron Gordon out of this. But the first one just cuts right off of it. Jokic hits him. Aaron Gordon gets a dunk. That cuts it to 4. Jamal Murray was getting hunted by Steph Curry down the stretch of this game. We're going to talk about it in a minute. He gets a big block on Jonathan Kuminga at the rim, runs out to the other end, draws a blocking foul. That cuts it to 2. Then Jokic gets Steph in a transition cross match on the right side of the floor. And as he dribbles into Steph wants to get scrammed out of the switch. So he turns and like runs to go guard somebody else and just hopes that another Warrior will run over there and guard Jokic. No Warrior goes and guards Jokic. Jokic just steps into the jumper by himself and ties the game. Then they go back to that exact same post up on the right block. The very second Kyle Anderson comes over to double Jokic, just feeds it over the top to Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon gets another bucket. Now it's 117 to 115. And again, this is where I want to kind of switch gears over to the defensive end of the floor, because one of the things the Nuggets did, throughout the game, they were bringing Jokic up to the level of the screen and all the Steph Curry actions, and then they were running him in a deep drop against some of the lesser players, you know, like if he was defending a screening action with like Gary Payton coming down the lane, or if he was defending a screening action against, you know, Brandon Podziemski coming down the lane. But the Warriors were getting a lot of really good stuff just based on the fact that Steph was bringing Jokic out to the level. Even though Steph didn't have a great scoring game, he had a great playmaking game. And a big part of that was him bringing Jokic up to the level. So Denver starts switching everything down the stretch of this game. And so Steph decides to start going at Jamal Murray. And this has been a recurring theme for Nuggets fans. Like Jamal Murray's been getting cooked at the end of these games, and it's been a huge problem for them. But he did a much, much better job. Again, like a lot of times when we talk about issues with these teams, it's like, oh, this team needs this, or this guy can't do that. And it's like, a lot of times the solution is just do better. Like Jamal's getting killed at the end of these games. I've seen them win the title where he holds up better in those situations, where he can make defensive plays like that block on Jonathan Kuminga at the rim. Sometimes you just got to sit in a damn stance, slide those feet, and make a damn play on the defensive end of the floor when they're trying to go at you, right? It's such an important part of overcoming your weaknesses as a basketball team, is just getting the guys that are the weakness in whatever that area is and just getting them to do better. And again, like Steph hit a little turnaround jump shot on him where he drove along the right lane line and spun over his right shoulder and hit a little jump shot, but he got stops the rest of the possessions. They went at Steph 5 times, or excuse me, Steph went at Jamal Murray 5 straight times down the stretch of that game, and they ended up generating 1 basket out of it. And then on the final 2 possessions, they successfully denied Steph the ball entirely, which forced Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins to try to make something happen, and he couldn't make anything happen. So the Warrior offense stalled out in large part because Steph wasn't getting clean dribble penetration on Jamal Murray. Steph was settling for some tough pull-up jump shots, having to pick up his dribble in the mid-range, and Jamal just did a good job. Got the stops that he needed. And that really was the story of the game for me last night as I watched that matchup. Like, we're talking about 2 teams here that have the same major weakness, which is beyond their superstar. They don't have reliable shot creation. Now, obviously, Denver has higher profile players, right? Guys that have better reputations than the secondary shot creators for the Warriors. But guys like Jamal Murray haven't been playing well this year. So like the same issue is there for Denver, which is like, if it's not Jokic, there's not a lot of like consistent offense that they have on this roster. But the difference is Jokic is playing at the level of a top tier superstar, the best player in the league, and Steph Curry is not. Jokic was able to make stuff happen for his team anyway, with no one else able to hit shots. Steph was not. Jokic had 38 points. Steph Curry had 24 on 23 shots. And again, Steph also had 11 assists. He had a great playmaking game. Steph did a lot to unlock the offense. But I don't think even Warriors fans would act like that was a top-tier superstar Steph game. And that's really the thing. Like, Steph has had some really good games this year against some really good teams. He's outplayed some stars. He outplayed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a game. He outplayed Jason Tatum in a game. He's outplayed guys, and we've seen what it looks like. Golden State can beat the Thunder. Golden State can beat Boston. But it depends on that version of Steph. Like, they didn't beat Boston or beat OKC with Steph where his average is this year at 22.6 points per game. They beat those teams when Steph was able to reach that level. And that's the thing. It's like Steph has had some really good games this year, but he's averaging 22.6 points per game for the season, and he was right around that number for the tail end of last season. The scoring volume has been down for a really long time. The teams are really loading up on him. And again, in the past, teams were really loading up on him in 2021, and he averaged, 32 points per game because he was playing like the best player in the world at that point. Now, I'm going to say the exact same thing that I said as it pertains to LeBron, right? Like, I don't think these guys are over. I don't think the run of these guys is over. I think that they have more good basketball in them, but they just have to find a way to play better basketball. And as long as they continue to play like this, it's going to be really hard for their teams to overcome their shortcomings, right? The Lakers have shortcomings in terms of their athleticism on the perimeter, which the Warriors don't. But the Warriors have issues with shot creation off of Steph, which the Lakers don't. They have tons of guys that can run offense, right? We're going to talk about that later when we talk a little bit about Spencer Dinwiddie, because I find his success in Dallas to be pretty fascinating as it pertains to where he kind of slotted as a shot creator compared to where he was with the Lakers, right? Like, the bottom line is these teams have glaring flaws. The Warriors don't have reliable shot creation beyond Steph, and the Lakers don't have perimeter athleticism. And right now, LeBron James and Steph Curry are not doing enough to overcome that. And like, I get that it's tough. And I get, for the record, I still believe these teams are worth investing in. But at this point, until whatever change is made, the only thing that can really remedy this is like Steph's got to get back to the point where he's averaging 28, 29 points per game on over 60% true shooting. And until he does that, it's going to be really hard for this team to beat the good teams that are in the Western Conference, and they're dropping some games right now. And again, with Jokic, it's the exact opposite story. Like, he's overcoming a lot of these issues because he's playing better basketball than anyone else in the world is at this point. He's methodically walking teams down at the end of games, getting whatever the hell he wants for even, like, he's creating makeable shots for players that have their issues. If Aaron Gordon's got to shoot spot up threes all night, it's going to be an issue. But if he's just catching and dunking off of cuts, it's going to work. Like, obviously, in order for the Nuggets to get to that top tier level, they're going to need Jamal Murray to return to form. They're going to need a lot of things to kind of change in the way guys have been playing to start this season. But in terms of floating the ship over the course of the regular season and kind of maintaining where they need to be, Jokic right now is allowing them to make up for that, and they're playing better basketball right now. Again, like, that's when it almost always just comes down to, like, how well are your stars playing? I don't really even think it's possible to properly evaluate the supporting cast of teams like this when their stars aren't playing well, because supporting cast players depend on the advantages created by their stars, right? And so, like, it's just one of those things to keep an eye on. Like, again, I don't think it's over. I think both Steph and LeBron will have moments this year where they get back to form, but neither of these teams is accomplishing anything unless they get to April and they're playing at the level they need to be playing at as top-tier superstars in this league. The Emirates NBA Cup is here, and you can win big getting in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who will win this year? We'll find out soon, but there's sure to be rim-rattling slams and no-look passes that bring the crowd to their feet. Get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. The New York Knicks are currently the favorite to win the NBA Cup at plus 450. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. If you are suffering from daily aches and pains, please listen closely. Top medical experts have unveiled a new natural pain reliever that is changing the way Americans fight pain. 100% drug-free Canalidine. Canalidine is the only solution in the world that optimizes your body's natural painkillers, called endorphins, providing full-body relief without dangerous pills or known side effects. Over 1 million Americans and hundreds of professional athletes, including UFC fighters, have already embraced Canalidine's pain relief power. Best of all, Canalidine is legal worldwide, certified drug-free, and does not cause side effects, grogginess, or addiction. After 14 years of clinical research, it has been proven safe and effective, backed by thousands of successful use cases from other Americans just like you. And best of all, today you can try Canalidine for less than $1 per day. This is your opportunity to finally live pain-free. Click the link below to try the only Canalidine product in the world, risk-free, for a full 90 days. This private link and special discount expire at midnight tonight. Trycono.com/hoops. That's TRYCONO.com/hoops. Experience daily pain relief with Canalidine. You have nothing to lose but your pain. All right, moving on to Magic-Knicks. The Knicks did a really nice job of containing the basketball in this game. Again, that's been one of their biggest issues throughout this entire season. Just not very good at the point of attack for a roster that should be, given the personnel that they have on board. They did a couple of specific things and a lot of matchup stuff, right? Like Orlando is not a great pull-up jump shooting team. So you can go underneath ball screens. You can give them space and ISOs and try to absorb contact rather than needing to pressure the ball. But they just, as a team, did a better job. They were shrinking the floor with nail help and stunting. They were in their ISOs, like giving that space and kind of playing in that middle ground where you feel like you're baiting teams into tougher pull-up jump shots. Their weak side rotations were really solid. They got a lot of steals with the wingman covering for the low man. Again, I always talk about the difference between like what I see when I see a bad team versus a good team, where like a lot of the bad teams, it's like you just run a ball screen, you just kick to the corner and a guy gets a wide open three. But the good teams will have that windshield wiper rotation where the guy who's guarding the weak side wing will drop to the corner. And a lot of times if you time that right, you can get steals in those situations. And the Knicks got a couple steals like that. And then Jalen Brunson really put this game away in the early third quarter. I mean, the Knicks were dominating throughout. They were up 20 at the half, but he really put the game away in the early third quarter, just going at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He kicked him, did like a little low gather on a crossover where he got an and one. He put him in jail on a ball screen and bumped him off for an easy mid-range jump shot. He had another low gather on Wendell Carter Jr. on a little slice through the lane. And both Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby hit movement threes in that run. Just coming off, Mikal came off a little Chicago action in the corner, knocked one down. OG hit one in transition when he was running, and all of a sudden they were up by 35 and the game was over. And so the Knicks offense is really coming together, kind of the way I was hoping it would when I saw the trades. Again, as I talked about last year, one of the big changes in my basketball worldview is that in order to be a truly great offense that is good enough to win at the highest levels of the NBA, you have to have variety, and you have to have you have to have multiple ways to score the basketball, so that when a defensive adjustment comes that targets something that you like to do on a possession by possession basis, you can kind of shift gears and find something else to do, right? Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that Dallas ran into issues when they were able to just put Jason Tatum on the centers and shut down the ball screen attack. And all of a sudden it turned into like a lot of isolation jump shots, and Kyrie went cold, and Luka wasn't hot enough, and then they couldn't get the stops that they needed, and they ended up losing that series, right? Like, by adding the same thing goes with the Knicks, by the way. Like, when it's all Jalen Brunson and just a bunch of guys that are just passing the ball back to him, I feel like there's a certain limitation that offense can get to when they run into better defenses and things really grind to a halt. And so when you have more guys that can make plays, more guys that can capitalize on advantage, it's one of the things that I've always thought about when it comes to the higher levels of the NBA playoffs. When you face truly elite defenses, they tend to be really slow to break down. And what I mean by that is, like, when you do get over the top of a ball screen and get downhill a little bit, their point of attack guy usually is still pretty physical and making you feel pretty uncomfortable. Like even when it looks like there's a little room in the mid-range for a pull-up, like they usually have a really big, long ball screen defender that like kind of like can shrink that gap pretty quickly. And even the lob isn't as open as you think. And like you see a skip pass and you're like, oh, that guy's open, but you throw the skip pass and the dude who's in the low man position is just insanely fast and he just can close out really well and that opening is just gone. And so like when you're playing against the better defenses, it's like you have to create a very slight advantage at the start of the possession by barely getting the defense to lean one way. And then you have to kick to a guy who's got a really good defender closing out at him, and he's got to turn that closeout into an even bigger advantage. And then that guy's got to come off of the next closeout and do an even better job. And then maybe you'll get a moderately contested three or a moderately contested shot at the rim or a matchup that you kind of like that you might be able to get an ISO or post-up shot against. But like when you're playing against the elite defenses, it's just really hard. And so having really high-level offensive players all over the floor makes it easier for you to do that incremental breakdown of a defense. The Knicks have been the number one offense in the league this year. They have a 123 offensive rating in their last 11 games. Last night against Orlando was their 9th game this season, scoring over 120 points. And like, again, when you, there's some specific dynamics at play that make it more complicated, right? Like Cat as a spacing big always causes issues for certain teams, but like, a lot of teams are, putting their center on Josh Hart and causing problems there. So it's like one of those things where it still comes down to, at the end of the day, your ability to capitalize and expand on advantages and then to finish plays at the end. And then just having Mikal Bridges on the floor. By the way, Mikal Bridges is playing much better. That was a beautiful game against Orlando there. He's starting to hit some of those threes when he's running into the corner on the move or relocating, right? He's starting to make some of those classic mid-range pull-up jump shots that he used to make all the time when he was driving closeouts in Phoenix. By the way, Mikal Bridges' first 10 games, 15 points per game. His last 11 games, 18 points per game. His three-point shooting percentage has gone up from 31% to 35% over that span. So, like, getting more juice out of Mikal Bridges. OG Anunoby went cold there for a while, but he got back against Orlando. He's had stretches where he's been really good. Karl-Anthony Towns has been amazing all season. He's averaging 25 points per game on 65% true shooting. That's just outrageous, right? I mean, Jalen Brunson looks as comfortable as ever. He gets to pick his spots more than ever. He has more space to work with than ever. His usage has dropped. Last year, he was a 33% usage guy, which is like closer to Luka than you'd like to be, right? But in this season, he's down to 30%, which is pretty standard for a superstar in this league when you're in a normal equal opportunity offense, right? As a result, he's over 60% true shooting for the first time since coming to the Knicks, right? So like all of this has just made life easier on everybody. And then even like all these guys fit really well. Like Josh Hart obviously has his shooting limitations, but he brings a lot of downhill force. He had 10 assists against the Magic. And now, after watching the game, some of those were just like swing passes to dudes who made one-on-one shots that probably shouldn't have counted as assists, but he still gets like 3 or 4 assists a game where he's just bringing downhill force with a transition drive or even just an offensive rebound for a kick out. It's like he makes plays or creates advantages for his teammates using his downhill force. He's like a little bowling ball that's really difficult to stop when he gets going with a full head of steam. And so they just have all of this offensive talent. It's been super resilient too. Like in the 5 games that the Knicks have played against top 10 defenses, according to Cleaning the Glass, they have a 117 offensive rating, which ranks 5th in the NBA. So their offense has continued to function even when they've played the higher level defenses in the league. During the 8-2 stretch that they are in their last 10 games, their defense has been a little bit better too. They have a 113.8 defensive rating, which is 17th in the league over that span. It's a little more complicated than that, right? Like Orlando is a team that they could go under picks on, that they could play off of guys and kind of pack the paint. Most of the limited offenses they've played, they've been able to shut down, but like Phoenix lit them up a little bit. Denver lit them up a little bit. Dallas lit them up a little bit. They just happened to outscore Phoenix because they scored 138 points, and they happened to outscore Denver because they scored 145 points. But like the only reason I'm really concerned there and the only reason I'm harping on that all season is because I think in the big picture, you've got to think about everything through the lens of Boston. You won't be able to outscore Boston. I think they'll be able to outscore basically any other team in the league if they need to in a series. I feel like that's an option, which is like we can just score crazy well and give ourselves a chance to beat this team. I feel like they can do that to get to just about anybody. But Boston is a completely different story. And you're going to have to find a way to slow down Boston's offense if you're going to have any chance to win that conference. So like really encouraging stuff on the offensive end of the floor. Everything coming together with the vision that you would have expected with making a deal for a guy like Mikal Bridges, with making a deal for a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns. The two-man game with Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson continues to be devastating. All sorts of encouraging stuff there. But I'm going to keep harping on the defense all season because it's just something that they need to polish up if they're going to contend with a team like Boston. On the Orlando front, I thought this was really fascinating. They're second in defensive rating on the season, but this was yet another example of their defense getting lit up by an elite offense. The Knicks are number 1 in offense. They put a 117 offensive rating on the Magic. Memphis is number 5 in offense. They put a 118 offensive rating on the Magic. The Cavs are second in offense. They put a 117 offensive rating on the Magic. The Lakers were a top 5 offense at the time of their matchup. They've slipped to 10 now, but they're still top 10. They hung a 121 offensive rating on the Orlando Magic. In fact, according to Cleaning the Glass, despite the Magic being second in defense overall, they're just 14th in defense against the 10 best offenses in the league. So it's not a very resilient defense. The top 5 most resilient defenses, by the way, for those wondering, this is just a little side note: Memphis, Houston, OKC, the Clippers, and Golden State. All teams with just an absurd amount of speed. Now, what's causing the problem? When I watch the Magic, the consistent theme is they get spread out and lit up from 3 in those games. So like when they can play teams and they can really pack the paint, their size becomes a big problem. And they do have speed at the guard position, but without Paolo, they're not as mobile on the front line as they could be at times. And they can get a little bit reckless with their gambling. Again, this team is 3rd best in the league at forcing turnovers, 2nd best at blocking shots. But when they leave their feet or when they lunge for the ball against smart teams, they can end up in rotation. And when they're in rotation, some of their bigger, slower guys can be an issue there. It's not a huge deal. And I do think Paolo is a major help there because just adding another guy who's 6'10 and pretty damn fast is going to go a long way to helping them cover ground in rotation. But it's just something interesting to keep an eye on in terms of a trend, which is that the Orlando Magic are getting stops against everybody except the best offenses in the league. And in those games, they're getting lit up from 3 and getting kind of burned in rotation a lot. Just something to keep an eye on as we progress through this season. All right, before we get out of here, let's move on to Memphis, Dallas. Kind of a wild game. Memphis completely dominated most of the second half. Ja Morant was like annihilating them. He was just getting to wherever he wanted on the floor. He had 26 points just in the second half. And Dallas kind of felt like they were on their heels most of the game. And by the way, Memphis has been a top 5 offense this year. And it starts with Ja. No one can really guard this guy. He's playmaking at an extremely high level. He's just slicing and dicing teams in the middle of the lane. He hasn't been shooting very well this year, but he's got such a repertoire of counter moves and over the top shots that he can hit in the short to mid range. Like he's over 52% on floaters and hooks this year. So even though he's shooting like a super low 29% on off the dribble jump shots, he's still getting enough over the top shot creation as an option for him in the short to mid range. And his playmaking has been so good there. It's just been a problem for a lot of teams in this league as Memphis has been a really good offense. But Dallas walked him down in that fourth quarter. PJ Washington, I thought, was the star of that run. He had a couple of huge threes. He beat Jay Huff on a driving a closeout out of the right corner where he made a really athletic move towards the rim. He also got the key stop on Ja Morant, a possession where, again, like with Ja, you give him space because the pull-up jumper's not there, but even if you beat him to the first spot, it's his counter moves that he has in that mid-range, Euro step spins. He hit Klay Thompson with a disgusting spin move in that fourth quarter that just left him like glued to the floor. And like he just has all these counter moves in that range. So you have to like absorb contact by beating him to the spot. Then you have to recover to that secondary move. And he got a great contest on a Ja Morant little mid-range shot where he forced him to really fade and have to shoot it higher than he typically does and forced a miss. It was a huge stop in that game. Luka Doncic hit a huge 3 after Ja Morant hit a 3 that put him up 8. He had a huge 3, a step back over Marcus Smart that pulled them back within 5 and kept the game close. Derek Lively had 2 huge offensive rebounds. And then Spencer Dinwiddie hit the biggest shots of the game, a running transition 3 on the right wing that kind of was a little bit of an iffy shot, but like he got his legs into it and he shot it up in the air and he knocked it down. And then a couple possession, I think it was the very next possession, actually, he ends up hitting the dagger on the right wing that puts the Mavericks up 5 and they get out of there for the game. Now, before we move on to some of the big picture stuff, a lot of talk for coming out of that game about free throw differential and like, oh my God, the refs just gave Dallas so many free throws in that fourth quarter and blah, 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 blah. And like, you guys know how I feel about this sort of thing. Like, I am consistent across the board, regardless of team, regardless of who it is. I think complaining about free throw differential is the lamest shit in the world. It's a loser mentality. Even when I see pros and pro coaches do it, I'm like, ugh, like that's just such a bad look. Because like, once again, when you go on the road, you expect that you're going to probably be on the wrong end of a couple of calls. It's part of your mental toughness going into that situation. You have to be ready for it, prepared for it, and be willing to play through it, right? And then 9 times out of 10, when I go back and watch these games and I see a free throw differential, the team that's getting more free throws is almost always the team that is playing a style that is conducive to it. They're usually playing with more force. They tend to have like a play style that is maybe more grifty and just better at getting to the line. They usually are bigger and more athletic, and smaller players are trying to compensate for it by hacking and doing that sort of thing. And like, I watched that game and like, yeah, there were a couple of calls I didn't like. The offensive rebound with the one that got reviewed where they ended up reversing it and giving Derek Lively 2 free throws. Like, yeah, I disagree with that. I think it should have just been Dallas side out of bounds or baseline out of bounds. Like if you're, it just is ridiculous to just reward somebody with free throws for contact that happens all the time in the end of these games when guys are fighting for rebounds. So like, yeah, I thought that was a bad call. There was also a Jaren Jackson baseline drive where I thought he got Derek Lively was out of position, and I thought he kind of came down on his shoulder. I thought it should have been a foul, right? But the rest of them, like Marcus Smart trying to fight over the top of a screen against Luka Doncic, like 45 feet from the basket and tripping him, like that's a stupid foul. And it's a foul every single time. You tripped him, so he fell. The ref's not going to just let it go, and you're in the penalty. And again, that's a pick 45 feet from the basket. Luka's not going to pull up that shot. Just go under. By physically fighting over the top of that screen, you put the ref in a position where he could make a call, and he did. There was another play. It was a three-point game, like with like 2 minutes left. And Luka gets a defensive rebound, and Marcus Smart just runs in and hacks him on both arms, like right in front of the ref. If you watch the replay of that, you can see the ref like blow the whistle and kind of shake his head a little bit as if like, dude, you're making me make the call. Like, what the hell are you doing? And so like more often than not, when I see games like that and I go back and look, the team that ends up in the free throw disparity is just doing stupid shit. And that's what Memphis was doing. Yeah, there were a couple of bad calls. You're right. It's part of the game. If you go on the road, you expect to get a couple of bad calls. I'll be rooting for the Lakers tonight in Miami. I expect them to get a couple of bad calls down the stretch of that game. That's just how it goes when you play basketball, especially when you go on the road. It's always a part of the game. It can happen to you at home too. It's a variable. You go into games knowing the refs are going to make mistakes just like we are going to make mistakes. That is part of basketball. And again, like, I'm not trying to harp on Memphis fans here because I've seen Dallas fans do it. Hell, Lakers fans, the Lakers have the best free throw differential in the league over the last couple of years. And I've seen Laker fans say LeBron gets the worst whistle and AD got hacked on that one. Like, everyone does it. I personally think it's lame. I think it's I think it's a huge waste of time to even focus on. I have big picture concerns about officiating in the NBA, but I think talking about it within within the scope of competition is a big waste of time, and I think it's a loser mentality. And again, like, this has been a consistent theme for Memphis. They have struggled with execution and decision making at the end of games. They're 2-6 in clutch situations this year. They had a negative clutch net rating a couple years ago when Ja was healthy most of the season. Again, like, this is one of those things where it's like a lot of times at the end of these games, it'll swing on a couple of decisions. I thought Marcus Smart rushed a 3 at above the break on a ghost screen. I thought it was a bad shot. Him committing those 2 bad fouls. Those 3 mistakes get wiped out. That could be a very different game, right? Like, it's just, more often than not, it just comes down to your decision-making and execution in those situations, not something out of your control like the refs or something along those lines. And bottom line is, Ja Morant, after slicing and dicing them all night, really couldn't get anything for himself except for that 3-point shot that he hit from above the break there in crunch time. So, like, that was the issue. At the end of that game, Luka was able to consistently generate some pretty high-quality shots, and Memphis wasn't. They ended up getting the win. And key offensive rebounds for Dallas, things along those lines. I was thinking about this while I was watching the game last night. I think Dallas is the 3rd best team in the entire NBA. I landed here in a different way than I did last year. Like, last year, I had Dallas as 3rd as well going into the playoffs. I had Boston and Denver, and then a end of a tier, and then I had Dallas as the top of the second tier of championship teams. This year, I came in with Dallas at number 5. I had Denver and New York above them, but from what I've seen from all 3 of those teams this year, I think Dallas is better than both of them. They just have so many good players, and some of last year's guys have gotten better. Luka and Kyrie are Luka and Kyrie. I'm not going to get too far into them. Like, Luka's numbers are down this year, and everyone's freaking out. I couldn't care less. I expect Luka to be a better player than he was last year by the time he gets to the postseason, as long as he stays healthy. So I'm just not worried about Luka. And by the way, in his last 2 games, he's averaging 37 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists on 57% from the field and 47% from 3. With 7 steals, by the way, as he continues to play passing lanes really well. Like, Lucas seems to be getting back to form. I'm not worried about him. PJ Washington is shooting the ball much better than he did last year. You remember last year after the finals when I talked about how much PJ Washington would probably be repping above the break threes all summer in the gym? Well, he's shooting 49% on above the break threes this year. He has good form. I think he's capable of being a reliable shooter there. And that could be key for the Boston matchup. As we know, in the Boston matchup, with Derek Jones out of the equation, that's likely going to be a center on PJ Washington and him needing to hit pick and pop jump shots if they were to get back into that matchup. Those above the break threes are vitally important for them in that specific matchup. He's also just a really good functional athlete. Like, he got that key stop against Ja. He gets contested defensive rebounds. He brings real downhill force driving closeouts. He can beat mismatches in the post. He's just a really, really good player. Derek Lively is just awesome. He had 6 offensive rebounds last night. Last year, Derek Lively was basically a 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover guy. This year, he's a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover guy. Like, I talked about guys getting better. Derek Lively and PJ Washington are just better basketball players now than they were last year. That's an add of talent to this team. By the way, Derek Lively is over 50% on hooks when he needs to finish over the top of a switch or a quick offensive rebound putback, something along those lines. He's generated 13 points on 10 post-ups this year. That's low volume, but that's 1.3 points per possession when you dump the ball to the block to Derek Lively. Him and PJ Washington just make for a very athletically imposing front line. They defensive rebound really well when the two of them are on the floor together. Dallas has not been a good defensive rebounding team this year, but they get 75% of their defensive rebounds that are available when PJ and Derek Lively are on the floor together. They both can switch in ball screens and guard perimeter players. They run the floor super well. Dallas has a 96th percentile transition defense when those two are on the floor together, and they provide spacing in their own ways, with PJ Washington knocking down shots and driving closeouts, and with Derek Lively as a vertical spacer and a guy who can make plays in the 4-on-3 when he gets ignored in blitzes and stuff like that. So, like, PJ Washington and Derek Lively have both gotten better. Daniel Gafford gives them depth to have a good center on the floor for 48 minutes. Spencer Dinwiddie has become like their de facto third option and is closing games for them at the 3. In the last 5 games, Spencer Dinwiddie's averaging 17 points and 6 assists on 52% from the field and 52% from 3. Not to mention, he gives them a good perimeter defense option in that lineup. And, you know, I actually find this really fascinating because I wanted the Lakers to bring Spencer Dinwiddie back. I thought he was a good player, but he did not have a good offensive season the brief time that he was in LA. And a big part of that was where he was in the pecking order. Like, Austin was getting more touches than Spencer. D'Lo was getting more touches than Spencer. LeBron's getting more touches than Spencer. Hell, Rui's getting more touches than Spencer. Anthony Davis is getting more touches than Spencer. Spencer was like the 6th option on that team as he'd come in as a backup guard. Right? So, like, as I look at Dallas's situation and the recent success that Spencer's had, Spencer's a rhythm player. He needs to have the ball in his hands, and he needs to feel like he can take a shot without getting in trouble. He's the kind of guy, he's got a little bit of that audaciousness in him where he's like, he will take that movement transition 3 in a clutch situation, but he's also got the confidence and the skill to knock it down too. He just has to be in rhythm. And again, he'll have stretches when he goes cold and he has his issues, but I like him as an option there. It gives them an option, and that's really the key. It's about versatility. And we haven't even talked about the depth of the roster. Guys like Najee Marshall, Jaden Hardy, Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson hasn't even played really well this year, right? But, like, they have versatility. When you take a look at their core 4, so Kyrie, Luka, Derek Lively, and PJ Washington, we can assume that those 5 are more or less, or those 4 are more or less going to be the closing 4 for any matchup. Right? But because of certain players are playing better, they have a lot of different options they can go. Like, oh, you're playing a big team like the Denver Nuggets and you need more size. Well, bring in Maxi Kleba. Just go Luka, Kyrie, and then go PJ, Maxi, Derek Lively. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a lot of size. You can put a big on Jokic while having a big in help on the back line, right? You can put Kleba on Jokic and put Lively in help, right? You can bring in extra size for that matchup. Oh, we're guarding Boston, and we just need another guy who can guard on the perimeter really well. Well, you can go with Najee Marshall at the 3 or Spencer Dinwiddie with as well as he's playing. Spencer's a good defender. He's not a great defender, but he's a good defender, and he can really do the job. He's got long arms, good size, good strength. He can move pretty well, right? Let's say you're playing like a team like an Orlando or another team that has a lot of size that likes to match up on a team like the Lakers, for instance. Like Klay Thompson is one of the best options in the league for like defending players in the post and shooting the 3. And so you could put Klay at the 3 for matchups like that. They have a lot of versatility for different types of matchups in the conference. And it didn't feel like that last year because they didn't have, guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and Najee Marshall. They didn't have guys like Klay Thompson to have for those types of looks, right? They're deep enough to stay high in the standings all season. We just saw them weather the loss of Luka for a little while. And I think they match up better than with Boston than they did last year. Do I think they'd beat Boston? I wouldn't pick them, but it's an easier path to see. Like PJ Washington making above the break threes would really help in that matchup. I think Luka will be in better shape and defend better in that series after he got embarrassed last year. Spencer at the 3 gives them another mobile perimeter player to have as an option in those situations. Kyrie was really cold in that series last year. It's easy to see a pathway where he would be better this year, right? So like they're a long shot still because it feels like there's a gap between them and Boston, but I feel like they've closed that gap some amount. And so all it takes is certain variables to go their way for them to be able to potentially get it done in like a puncher's chance type of sense. And if you believe in that, again, all odds provided by DraftKings here, the Dallas Mavericks are plus 550 to win the conference and plus 1,100 to win the title. So some real odds opportunity there if you're looking to make a bet on Dallas. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We got another packed slate tonight. We'll have more game breakdowns and maybe even some film tomorrow. I will see you guys then.